Hey guys, Steinixos here. So on this episode of Slander Piece, we're going to be slandering the Gorosei. And honestly, the Gorosei might just be one of the most disappointing sets of Endgame antagonists I've ever seen in my life. Like, ever since Sabo and a few good men somehow managed to storm Marriage Ways, the so-called Holy Land, and walk away alive, I already had a feeling these guys were going to be a letdown. But it wasn't until the Egghead arc that I fully realized just how much of a bunch of bums these dudes really are. Now I know some of you are probably expecting a deep dive, an elaborate breakdown full of themes, symbolism, narrative structure, character arcs, and all that fancy analytical stuff. Maybe even some grand philosophical critique on how the Gorosei represent a flawed worldview or how they fail to serve as compelling ideological foils. But nah, it's not that deep. These guys are just bums, straight up, and that honestly is the root of the problem. But don't worry, I'm not just going to drop that and move on. I'm going to walk you through it. I'm going to explain exactly how the Gorosei fumbled the bag and why their presence in the story, at least so far, has been one of the biggest letdowns in One Piece's entire endgame. So the first question I want you to ask yourself is this. On Egghead, what did the Gorosei actually accomplish? Seriously, think about it. These are supposed to be 5 of the most powerful characters in the entire series. Characters who've been sitting in the shadows for over 1,000 chapters, building up this massive aura of mystery and menace. And yet, when they finally stepped onto the field, when it was finally their time to play ball, what did they actually do? Did they stop Vegapunk from getting his message out to the world? Well, not really, because even though they tried, most of the message still made it out to the masses. So, on that front, that's a failure. But okay, they did manage to kill Vegapunk, that's got to count for something, right? Well, even that's a stretch. First off, Kizaru did most of the heavy lifting. Saturn really just showed up at the end trying to steal credit. And even then, Vegapunk's not really dead. Sure, his main body and a bunch of his satellites might have been destroyed, but Lilith is still alive just living it up on Elbaf, so that's another failure. Alright, what about Nika then? You know, the ancient figure of legend, who just so happens to be Luffy, someone they've had over 800 years to prevent from reawakening, and who their boss Imu gets PTSD just from feeling the previous Joy Boy's haki. They're clearly terrified of this power, and yet, even with all 5 Gorosei on the island, backed by a full-scale Buster Call, what happened? Luffy and the entire Straw Hat crew escaped. Again, yet another failure. So when you really break it down, the Gorosei failed at every single major objective they had going into Egghead. They failed to stop Vegapunk's broadcast. They failed to fully eliminate Vegapunk. They failed to stop Nika. And they failed to prevent the Straw Hats from escaping. 4 big objectives. 4 massive failures. For all their build-up, all their supposed power and authority, the Gorosei pulled up to Egghead with the full weight of the world government behind them, and still came up short on nearly every front. Now normally you could excuse a character for failing at everything they set out to do. That kind of thing happens, especially with early or mid-series villains, you know, the Smoker, Crocodile and Gecko Moria types. They're built up a bit, they show up, they fumble, and that's fine, because you're not meant to take them that seriously in the long run. But the Gorosei, these guys aren't some mid-tier roadblocks. These are the endgame antagonists, the final bosses, the ones who've been looming in the background of the story for over 1,000 chapters, surviving purely off of hype. And you're telling me that after all that build-up, the first time we see them in real action, on Egghead no less, they can't accomplish a single objective. Like, come on now, that's wild. And it's not even just one of them. It's not like, oh, Saturn fumbled but the rest stayed behind. No, Saturn pulled up first, realized real quick that he was not built for this, and then called in reinforcements. All 5 of them showed up. That's 5 of the most hyped, supposedly godlike beings in the One Piece world, and still they got nothing done. Absolutely nothing. People really don't grasp how much of a flop you have to be to bring all 5 Gorosei to one island and still walk away with 0 success. Like seriously, just ask yourself this. If 5 Kaidos had shown up on Egghead instead of the Gorosei, do you think the result would have been the same? Of course not. 5 Kaidos would have steamrolled everything. Nobody's escaping. Not Luffy, not the crew, not Vegapunk, not even the snail they broadcast from. The only way they are surviving that is if Shanks, Dragon, the entire Straw Hat Grand Fleet, an ancient weapon, and maybe even Jesus himself all showed up at once. That's the level of power we're talking about. And yet somehow, these 5 dudes, who are supposed to be stronger than Kaido, who are literally positioned as divine level threats, do nothing. They're just bums, flat out. But you know what makes the failure even worse? The arrogance. Because the Gorosei are some of the most smug, pompous characters we've ever seen. For 1,000 chapters, they sat almighty in the Holy Land, acting like they're untouchable. Every time you see them, they're oozing condescension. I mean, we saw Nusjuro out here talking about, the time has come for a great cleansing. Mars, when talking to Lucci, is acting like he is a god, where in response to Lucci asking him to spare Kaku, one of his own employees I might add, Mars just pompously says, it's hard to single out a lone insect when exterminating the hive. And even from their introduction, you had them being called the greatest or highest authority in the world. They're basically always just talking about how Imu is a god, how they themselves are the hands of fate, moving in ways we mortals couldn't understand. And then their first real showing. They pull up to Egghead and fail every objective. Not 1, not 2, every single one. But wait, there's more. It's not just that they failed, it's how they failed. Embarrassingly. You've got Luffy out here grabbing Saturn by the face like he's a chew toy, while simultaneously dealing with Kizaru. Then what? He flattens Saturn into a pancake. And the other guy, the giant worm-looking one, got a building stuffed in his face like he was just background noise. And you want to talk poetic humiliation. The cherry on top, the true icing on the cake, is the fact that the final nail in their coffin was a piece of string. Let that sink in. They lost to a piece of string. A single piece of string, infused with Joy Boy's haki, that had been sitting around collecting dust for over 1,000 years, was all it really took to send these endgame antagonists packing. So yeah, the Gorosei, they're not terrifying, they're not mysterious, they're just embarrassing. But it doesn't even end there. Like, let's just say, hypothetically, you ignore the fact that they failed at everything they set out to do. And let's say you ignore all the reasons why those failures are even worse when you consider the context. Even if you push all that aside, the Gorosei are still terrible because they're just boring characters. Like seriously, even if you're not like me and have not gotten completely sick of Zoan Peace, because let's be real, before Egghead we had just got an entire arc centered around Zoan users, and now it feels like every new Devil Fruit since then has to be another Zoan. Even then, even putting that aside, even something as simple as their designs are still garbage. Let's go down the list. Saturn, he's just a crusty, uglier version of Black Maria. Nusjuro, that man looks like a dried out dollar store version of Killingham. Warkery, he's just a bulkier version of Hawk's mom, that giant pig, from 7 Deadly Sins, but with some random horns thrown on top. And don't even get me started on Jupiter. This man is literally a knockoff of the giant worm from Dune, but downgraded in every possible way. And to make it even worse, why does he have perfect teeth? Like, deadass. You're telling me this thing is supposed to be some world-ending terror, but he looks like he should be starring in a Colgate commercial. I'm sorry, but these are our endgame villains. A worm with pristine dental hygiene. Come on now, I'ma keep it a stack with you. The regular animals on Elbaf look cooler than the Gorosei. And then when you dig into their actual power sets, it gets even worse. Like, the only halfway interesting thing about them so far is their regeneration. And even that isn't special. Why? Because all the Holy Knights apparently have it too. So it's not even unique to the Gorosei. And on top of that, it's not even theirs. They're all just borrowing power from Imu. So no originality, no bonus points. Just leeching off their boss like a bunch of parasites. And outside of that regeneration, what can they even do? Let's see. We've got a giant bird that can fly. Okay, cool I guess. We've got a starved looking horse that runs fast. Sure, if I wanted lame transportation. A boar that screams really loud. Wow, groundbreaking. And a worm that acts like an oversized vacuum cleaner. Like, what are we even doing here? That stuff is boring, straight up, especially when you consider who came before them. Kaido, that's right. In the arc before Egghead, we had just come off from Kaido. This man is a dragon, which is already sick on its own. But even in his base dragon form, he can use cool special dragon clouds to not only fly, but even lift an entire island. He can breathe fire which evaporates mountains. He can launch giant wind blades, summon massive tornadoes, and even somehow shout actual lightning into existence. And then, just for the flex of it, he can create a Susanoo made of fire that's so hot it has the consistency of magma. That's the kind of energy you would expect from an endgame villain. But then the Gorosei pull up looking like a rejected Pokemon evolution line. And who have the collective charisma of soggy bread? Like, how do you go backwards from Kaido in every way and call that escalation? The Gorosei are not just bums, but rather it's much worse than that. They're boring bums. And again, even if you ignore everything else, the failures, the weak designs, the uninspired powers, there's still the simple fact that the Gorosei haven't done anything cool, like at all. In fact, it's been the opposite. They're not just uncool, they're categorically uncool. Let's take Saturn for example. This man spent most of his time on Egghead getting flattened, twirled like a pizza, and turned into mashed potatoes by the protagonists. Then there's Jupiter, you know, the giant worm with the perfect Colgate smile. He was literally just getting stuffed like a vacuum cleaner and chopped into pieces like a cursed garden hose. And even Mars, the one Gorosei who looked like he might actually have some aura, some presence, what did he do? That's right, he walked into Vegapunk's lab and started flexing his Conqueror's haki on snails. I'm not kidding, this man really pulled up and decided to intimidate some Denden Mushi. Like, we've unironically gone from Luffy knocking out 50,000 fishmen with a single burst of Conqueror's haki, each of whom is said to be 10 times stronger than a normal human, to flexing on the One Piece equivalent of a cell phone. Are you serious? At that point, it would have been less embarrassing if he'd just stood there and done nothing at all. So yeah, the Gorosei, they're inarguably, unquestionably, without a doubt, just straight up bums. But of course, there's always that one person in the back, like, "Oh Stein, you're being too harsh." Well, let me just remind you of something. The Gorosei were so bad at their jobs, so embarrassingly ineffective, that Saturn, the one who fumbled the hardest, got permanently decommissioned and replaced. That's right, he sat around for over 1,000 chapters, not doing anything only to get killed by his boss, and be replaced after monumentally fumbling his first on-screen side quest. And he was replaced with, wait for it, another senile old man. So even Imu, the actual final boss, agrees with me. That alone tells you everything. The Gorosei aren't these legendary forces of nature or the shadowy masterminds we thought they were. They're just replaceable tools. Background noise meant to stand next to real top tier characters like Imet, Joy Boy, Imu, 1 HP Kuma, and whoever else the plot actually cares about. So those characters can aura farm off of them. But anyway, that's the video guys. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. But anyway, see you guys next time.